So David, you were already the president of Samsung Next for several years, which is the venture capital and innovation group, but you were recently given a new big title, which is Chief Innovation Officer of all of Samsung Electronics. I mean, this is a 300,000 person company. It's making everything from smartphones, chips, displays, and more. I mean, how do you envision Samsung looking like in the next 5 years and beyond? And how do you build a roadmap to mesh the old Samsung with the new one you're seeing?
Well, that's the question I'm trying to answer. Right? We're working on that now, but we think that to answer that question, you have to have the right structure and people in place. And what we are doing is creating groups. And in particular, I run a group called Samsung Next. And we are focused on working with startups in particular, especially in software and services. Because it's an enduring paradox, isn't it, in business, that even for the most successful companies, it's essential to continue to move forward, to evolve. And if you look at consumer-facing software and services, historically, most of the innovation has tended to come from startups. So as a chief innovation officer, we have embraced this model of open innovation. To just take a step back, Samsung spends something on the order of $14 billion a year in R&D. And as important as our internal R&D is, we look to external sources of innovation. So the critical component of our innovation going forward is to work with outside parties, particularly startups, to bring them in. And in this group called Samsung Next, we have a venture capital group, which you mentioned. We have a business development group. We have M&A, and we do our own product development, all under one roof, with an exclusive focus on working with these startups.
You know, despite all the investments, Samsung is very much known as a hardware innovator and has struggled to make headway to be known as a software innovator. So what are some of the biggest challenges you're coming up against as you're mapping out how to future-proof this company?
So there's these designations that we all use to label companies. You know, are they hardware companies or are they software companies? And I believe that in the future, we won't use these designations because companies will just be successful or not, and products will just work or not. And the most successful products will most likely have what I call a thoughtful integration with hardware and software. The challenge is, though, is if you think about hardware or media even, when you launch a product, when you bring it out to the marketplace, it has to be perfect, right? Because once you sell that TV in a store, once that TV show is on air, you can't really change it. But of course, the opposite is true with software. The motto that most software companies live by is to launch early and iterate. You literally use your consumers to provide you with feedback so you can improve the product. So the challenge for companies on either side, if you come from a hardware background, is really understanding how you can be more agile and use your customers for feedback to create products and experiences that work. And then on the software side, you may launch and you can iterate, but you have to cross a certain threshold of quality so that it works for people. And this is why companies from both sides historically haven't always been able to work together effectively. And it's improving now. And what we're trying to do is within this hardware company, bring in people who have the software and services expertise to kind of inject that DNA into the bloodstream so that we can have the best of both.
And as you're linking the software to the hardware, I mean, in addition to the technical integrations, you touched on this a little bit earlier, how do you get that cultural mindset of this old, large company to fit with the fast pace of a startup culture?
So one of the things that is really effective in a company that often is so successful, it has a core product that is so big that it's often very difficult to look beyond it to see what's around the corner. What we do is we bring startups and entrepreneurs literally in front of our teams and decision makers to demonstrate, literally show them the things that are happening. Because I think all of us have experienced that as you get busier, your focus tends to get more narrow and on the things that are right in front of you. And what we often do is by investing in companies that we think present collaboration opportunities, we'll bring them in front of our people and literally have what we call demo days or workshops where we attack specific issues or opportunities by bringing a mix of startups, entrepreneurs, and established business folks from inside the company and outside to really kind of to create a blend, if you will, of ideas and then very specific action items. And this seems to be working.
I mean, Chief Innovation Officer, this is a new role for Samsung. This person hasn't existed before. Why did they create this position, and what does leader J.Y. Lee think of your vision?
So, especially in technology, things move so quickly. It's very difficult to think even a year out what's going to happen because the markets change so quickly and the dynamics are so fast-paced. One of the things that I'm trying to do is really leapfrog the 1 to 2 year thinking by identifying what the trends are and where we should or could be 3 to 5 years from now. And part of that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you think that you might want to be in a certain place 3 to 5 years from now, you back into what do you have to believe to get there? What would you have to do to get there? And so much of what we do is really identifying a vision and then figuring out what it takes to get there by bringing in, again, outside and inside thought leaders, and then experimenting. And this is something that I couldn't emphasize enough. A lot of times for bigger companies, because you're working on selling and hitting certain thresholds of either users or sales, you work so hard at trying to create big successes out of the gate. And most often, especially in software and services, these things take time and evolve. So one of the reasons that we have a product development group is to create prototypes, to experiment, to try things, to fail, to pivot. And then from that laboratory, if you will, of ideas and prototypes, take the things that seem to have the most momentum and promise and to inject it with the scale and the distribution and the marketing of the larger mothership, if you will.
And is J.Y. Lee on board with this idea?
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that we realize is in a company of 350,000 people where you're spending the kind of money that we are in R&D, having partnerships and collaborations with not just other companies, but research institutions and entrepreneurs all over the world is a fantastic way to make sure that you have a finger on the pulse of what's going on, not just on business and with technology, but what's happening with evolving consumer tastes and what it is that they really want from people who make products.
Now, I'm sure many people in the audience or watching on the live stream have a Samsung phone, and the smartphone market is slowing, and Samsung and other companies have been trying to revitalize it with new innovations like the foldable smartphone that Samsung is coming out with. So as Chief Innovation Officer, how are you looking at the smartphone business in the future for Samsung, and what's your plan to really reinvigorate growth and innovation there?
Well, one of the things about Samsung is that while we have a very successful mobile business and we sell 2 TVs a second, which a lot of people don't realize, we sell in any given year 500 million displays of one form or another. And for us, that is not just separate businesses, but a huge opportunity to connect these devices so that they can create complementary experiences. So as we think about things like IoT, and connected homes, as we think about the proliferation of AI, we think about these displays as touch points where we can gather information and then provide experiences that are chained together. So for example, many people, the biggest investment that they'll ever make is really in their home. And yet when you leave your home, you have no idea of what's going on. You have no relationship or ability to communicate with it as an entity. And so what we're seeing now is not just our company, but other companies giving consumers the ability to have a relationship and a dialogue with their homes. And this is supported and will be sort of fortified by having cameras and sensors and everything from climate control and energy usage to lighting, all connected. And so when you talk about a specific device like a smartphone or a TV, they can't just be seen as standalone devices, but seen as one of a portfolio of things that can give consumers a better experience. So when I'm away from my home, I might be able to send a message to my family, and it shows up on the display in our refrigerator. Or when I walk in front of my TV, the photos that I took over Thanksgiving break can easily be shown on my TV or the TV of someone that I care to share it with. So as we think about the future of our businesses, it's not just a pure hardware business, but we think about how we can create great experiences, right? Which again is what I call the thoughtful integration of hardware and software.
And when you look at investments, there's areas, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, blockchain companies, all sorts of frontier startups. I mean, what are your priorities when you're looking at all of the options out there?
Well, we are looking at blockchain startups. We are looking at AI. We just announced AI centers that we're creating around the world, and I just started a new seed fund focused exclusively on AI. We are looking at mobility and AR and VR, and anything or anywhere where this connection between hardware and software can create game-changing experiences. But one thing I'm particularly excited about and investing in and partnering in these days is what I call decentralization. And simply put, if you look at the history of computing, the pendulum has swung from centralized, where there were mainframe computers, to decentralized, where there were PCs, client servers, to centralized again with cloud computing. And I believe now the pendulum is swinging back to a decentralized world where you have more and more applications and processing and data and storage at the edge with mobile devices and other devices. And what that means is that the cloud doesn't go away. It complements the cloud. What it means is that as the proliferation of sensors and data increases, and services like autonomous driving and digital health and IoT that demand lots of data increase, more and more of our processing and storage will be done locally. And more will have to be, because consumers and governments want more privacy, want more security. Enterprises are much more concerned about what happens to their data when they work with third parties. And what we'll see is not just a decentralization in computing and architecture, but a decentralization in business models and the way people approach services. So imagine a world where, as a consumer, you can decide not only what data is tracked, but what you want to do with the data yourself. So, in fact, you may be open and want your personal data to be gathered and then be in a position to sell it to third parties. And that's a decentralized model. So these things are going to happen. And if you look at research reports today, somewhere near 10% of all the processing is done outside the cloud. By 2022, 50% will be done outside the cloud. And so what that means, if you're in business, is really thinking about what should be done locally closer to the user and what should be done in a cloud. And how that affects your services, I think, will be pretty fundamental. So as a company like Samsung, we're looking at how what happens to our devices, what kind of software and services we should provide, because it will be as game-changing as cloud computing has been.
And you're a global investor. You have offices all around the world, and Samsung is very critical. The Chinese market and the US market are critical to Samsung's businesses, whether it's selling the smartphones or the parts. How is Samsung navigating the current trade tensions between the US and China? And is that impacting your investment strategy at all?
Well, I'm not in the hardware business. I focus on working with startups, as I said. And our belief is that while Silicon Valley is a fantastic source of innovation, for me, it's almost more of a mentality. It's a way of thinking. And so innovation can be found everywhere. And we have set up offices and we have done deals all over the globe. So we will continue to do that. And we want to be wherever the entrepreneurs are.
Is there a desire to invest more in mainland China?
There's a general desire to invest, again, wherever there is opportunity. One of the interesting things that I found, though, is that while there are startups everywhere, there are different trends and different things that entrepreneurs focus on. So, for example, we opened up an office in Tel Aviv a few years ago, and these incredible technology, deep tech, computer vision, security, et cetera, that is coming out of our Tel Aviv office, and tremendous talent. Last year, we started investing out of Berlin all over Europe. And what I'm finding there is not so much the deep tech that we're seeing in Israel, but innovations on business models, deep experimentations on how you offer services to consumers. And from where we sit, both are really important. And I think there's opportunities for companies to really tap into different types of innovation and different types of entrepreneurial efforts all over the globe. So we'll continue to do that.
You spent a lot of time in Silicon Valley as well. I'm based there right now, and a big topic of discussion, given the death of Jamal Khashoggi and the Saudi Arabian government, there's been a lot of introspection about where startups and VCs should get their money from. I want to get your thoughts on that and whether or not you were invited to the Future Investment Initiative in Riyadh and how you handled that.
So on investment, we're a corporate venture group, so my only investor is Samsung. So my experience is really that. And I think if you look at venture capital trends, corporate venture is increasing significantly. So last year, something like 44% of all venture deals involve corporate venture, which is a significant bump up from years past. And one of the reasons why I think that is the case is that on one hand, it's much easier these days to build a product and launch a company, right? And look no further than the 2 million plus apps you see in your mobile store. But in the same vein, it's that much more difficult to be discovered. It's that much more difficult to find an audience and build a business. It's sort of like if a tree falls in the forest. And so I think a lot of the smarter entrepreneurs are realizing that by having a corporation invest, you can really explore different types of collaboration. You can explore distribution models. You can work on sharing insights, market insights, consumer insights. You can sell together, which we often do with some of our portfolio companies. They provide certain software and services. We provide hardware, and we'll approach customers together. And there's always the proximity that allows for greater familiarity and acquisitions later. So in terms of LPs and all that, I'm not sure I have much to add there, but I do think that for corporations that are seeking to innovate, are seeking new growth opportunities, the idea of investing and partnering with entrepreneurs and helping them figure out what their product market fit is mutually advantageous.
And did you decide or decline or were invited to the Saudi Arabian conference in Riyadh?
I was invited to go, but I did not attend.
And we only have a minute left, but you had also spent some time in Google and AOL, and right now, in the tech sector, after years of unprecedented growth, there's been a huge tech rout. And from your opinion, where are we right now in the tech cycle?
I think there's a tendency sometimes to look at a very narrow slice of time or history and put labels on it. I think we're in the middle of something, but the evolutions of technology will continue. There will be ups and downs. The reality is that as long as consumers continue to seek ways to improve their lives, and as long as technology can enable that, there's always going to be opportunities to offer products and services. So it's a huge generalization. But I'm not an investor in those companies. I'm not familiar with what's going on in any specific company. But I will tell you that in terms of the kind of talent and different ideas we're seeing in the pipeline for startups, it's never been better. The kind of products and services that we see that have the potential to literally change entire industries is never been more obvious in terms of potential. And when I see the rate of innovation outside the United States, it's really unbelievable, because now you're seeing governments, and you're seeing large corporations wanting to not just embrace this, but get involved and jump in. And you're seeing, for the first time, really some of the output of that. So, the cycle I see is continued innovation and lots of interesting opportunities.